Peter B. Collins, News and Comments. It's Wednesday, October 12th, 2016. As you probably know, my daily free news and comment podcast, this one, is now available on YouTube. And I want to give a shout out to our new listeners in Thailand and the United Kingdom checking in on YouTube. A few weeks back, in deference to the protests that have been building in North Dakota, the Obama administration made some interesting moves. And there was a pause in the construction activity. There were some legal actions, and the Department of Justice and the Army Corps of Engineers both appeared to be putting a hold on the project. And while we were all distracted by Donald Trump's pussy grabbing and the debate on Sunday night, I've learned that on Sunday there was a court ruling issued that permitted the construction to resume within 20 miles of Lake Oahe. And the construction did resume yesterday, and the water protectors continue to protest, and some are being arrested there. And the company that's building it is Energy Transfer Partners. They say they're taking every effort to make sure there is no oil spill or leak or any other environmental tragedy that may occur. But it appears that that was just a feint by the Obama administration. And one of the things we've learned is the militarized response to the unarmed First Amendment activists who were there protesting at the site of the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I want to mention that there is a new documentary that should be hitting the screens of theaters across the country in a week or two. It's called Do Not Resist. I've seen it, and I have an interview with the filmmaker lined up for late next week, and I'll bring that to you just as soon as it occurs. But the militarization of police response was noticed in Ferguson and subsequent public protests. But it's been going on for years, and the documentary does a great job of explaining that. But out there on the Great Plains in North Dakota, the militarized response is pretty visible. There are constant overflights of the camp by plane and helicopter. Some are state police choppers, and some are owned by a private contractor, a security contractor, which is being paid by the pipeline company. And while we hear from the governor and the local sheriff that they allow constitutionally protected lawful protest, the message that you get from the police activities is very different. There are a lot of checkpoints and roadblocks where IDs and license plates are recorded, and they ask you, where are you going? Why are you here? And, of course, once they have you tracked in their system, that makes it easier for them to monitor your whereabouts. There's also one of those big Bearcats, an armored personnel carrier, and an MRAP, Iraq-era hardened Humvee vehicle that have appeared at nearly every action over the past 2 weeks. Not only that, after people get arrested for their First Amendment activities, the right to counsel, the right to free association are being abrogated. Water protectors report being interrogated without a lawyer present by a gang intelligence unit from the North Dakota Department of Corrections. And they're asked about where they are camped and who they are associated with. So this is compounded by the presence of G4S, the notorious private security organization. They surfaced in the news because Omar Mateen, the alleged Orlando shooter, worked for G4S. And it was while he was on duty as a corporate security guard assigned to the, I think it's the Port Lucie County courthouse, that he had a number of really offensive encounters with uniformed deputy sheriffs who, knowing that he was Muslim and had been born to parents who came from outside the country, they harassed him, and it helped to radicalize him, I believe. At any rate, G4S is one of these corporate militarized security companies. They're not quite mercenaries, but you could characterize them that way. There also is an abrogation of the rights of Native Americans to practice their form of religion. And in this country, we hear a lot from the right wing about how Christians are being oppressed and their religious freedom is being infringed upon. But the spiritual practices of Native Americans are not respected in the same manner. And the state of North Dakota has brought in an archaeologist who challenges the claim of the Indian tribes that this is a burial ground and a sacred area. But I would defer to the knowledge of the natives over the state government officials. Meanwhile, yesterday, 5 activists managed to shut down all of the tar sands pipelines crossing from Canada into the United States. In a bold move on Tuesday morning, 5 different people went to different locations where they were able to access the manual safety valves. They shut down Enbridge's Line 4 and 67 in Leonard, Minnesota, TransCanada's Keystone Pipeline in Walhalla, North Dakota, Spectra Energy's Express Pipeline in Coal Banks Landing, Montana, and Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain Pipeline in Anacortes, Washington. Good move. Now, for me, this is the kind of nonviolent, direct action that I support. Turning off a pipeline might have a short-term, economic impact on the company, but this is not the same as vandalism or any kind of anarchist action. And I, for one, applaud it. Here are quotes from a couple of the people who shut down those lines. 59-year-old Ken Ward of Corbett, Oregon, said there is no plan of action, policy, or strategy being advanced now by any political leader or environmental organization playing by the rules that does anything but acquiesce to ruin. Our only hope is to step outside polite conversation, put our bodies in the way. We must shut it down, starting with the most immediate threats, oil sands fuels and coal. And 64-year-old Leonard Higgins from Eugene, Oregon, is quoted as saying, because of the climate change emergency, because governments and corporations have for decades increased fossil fuel extraction and carbon emissions when instead we must dramatically reduce carbon emissions, I am committed to the moral necessity of participating in nonviolent direct action to protect life. Now, this activism is spreading, and I've highlighted this before. We're in touch with Charlie Pierce in Austin, Texas. He's the leader of the great band called Choctaw Wildfire, and he's been on fire on Facebook the last couple of weeks. And yesterday, on October 11th, there were protests in Austin, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, Dallas, Fort Worth. They were protesting in solidarity with those opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline, but also drawing attention to operations in Texas, near El Paso, the Comanche Trail Pipeline, and in the Big Bend, Presidio region, the protest is against the Trans-Pecos Pipeline. And I am delighted to see this in Texas. Texas, that's right. Texas, people are protesting against the oil business. I think that is a wonderful thing. And at some point, maybe our political leaders will figure out how to get on the right side of this issue. While we're talking about surveillance and the militarized response, Jason Leopold published a piece the other day at Vice News based on Freedom of Information Act disclosures from the Inspector General of the intelligence community. And he had requested information on employee misconduct and crimes that have been investigated by the Inspector General. And what he's discovered is that contractors and employees who work for the surveillance arm of our government and the corporations that are contracted by the NSA and its sister agencies, well, all kinds of stuff goes on where people who spend all day in front of their computers are watching porn, they engage in sexual chats, they engage in personal vendettas, and one individual whose name we don't know, a contractor for the company SAIC, admitted that 95% of his time spent on the Internet was for personal use at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He spent nearly all day emailing and instant messaging his friends. And that person billed the government over a 6-year period just under $1 million for 10,573 hours of work, even though much of it, he said, was, looking at online dating and social accounts to view images of scantily clad or naked women. And he's not the only one. There are others who got caught engaging in graphic sexual chat, some of which was aimed at minors. There are at least 2 instances of that have been reported. And the contractor's access to government computer systems was suspended, and he was escorted out of the facilities once they discovered this, but it went on for 5 or 6 years. And in another case, a contractor working for the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, and none of us know what they do. They oversee spy satellites. He abused his infant son between 2008 and 2009, and the allegations surfaced during his 2009 polygraph examination. But apparently he didn't lie about it, and so he kept his job. And in most cases, information or admissions of child abuse, evidence of child abuse, mandated reporting is the term under the law. A teacher, a doctor, a police officer, a nurse working in an emergency room, if they see evidence of that sort, they are told that they're going to be breaking the law if they don't report it. In another case, the Inspector General took a look at a General Dynamics subcontractor and found that while assigned to work for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for 7 years, he didn't work at all. There was nobody supervising him. He didn't show up. He didn't work. But he got paid. Those are your tax dollars at work, and I'm sure you feel safer, secured against the enemies of the United States and those who would seek to conduct mayhem in our homeland. Meanwhile, there's a similar beef over at the FBI where they've contracted out the handling of sensitive surveillance documents, including reports and briefs that go to the super-secret Federal Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, the FISA court. So there's a private company that has $1 million annual contract. They're called Aveshka. They prepare, organize, courier, and disseminate surveillance materials, including documentation leading to court orders under the FISA law. And while the company has acknowledged that they have this contract and that they have relatively junior folks who work within the FBI's unit, and apparently some of these people do have security clearances. But former FBI agents are very upset about this, saying that this is critical, very secret work that cannot be compromised. And here's one former FBI agent. We have a private contractor preparing a wiretap request. That seems dangerous. Certainly the FBI has people who can walk across the street to the Department of Justice and deliver a FISA package. Meanwhile, this is sketchy and preliminary, but there was a plane crash Tuesday afternoon in Connecticut, near Hartford. One of the 2 people on board was killed when the plane crashed. The survivor says that it wasn't an accident. The local police say the investigation is active, still in its infancy. Nothing has been ruled out, including an accident. And one of the individuals, I guess the guy who was killed, was identified as a Jordanian national, Faris Freitag, and the survivor then said that it wasn't an accident. So we don't know much about it. The crash occurred near the jet engine factory of Pratt & Whitney, but it's not so far suggested that that was a target. I want to point out the Sunday New York Times lead editorial echoes my concerns that the topics of surveillance are not really a part of this political campaign. Donald Trump really hasn't said much about it. Hillary Clinton has been guarded and offered a few comments about surveillance and encryption, but she mainly says that she wants to knock heads together in Silicon Valley and get them to give the back door that the FBI has been demanding. She doesn't actually say that explicitly, but that's my interpretation of her message. And I think it's important to note that in none of the debates so far have the moderators brought up any issues related to domestic surveillance. I guess they have nothing to hide. We've got more information coming out from the leaked emails that are being widely ignored by the corporate media. And I watched the PBS NewsHour last night, and they were explaining away these emails as the products of Russian hacking. And this creates the remarkable consensus that is happening inside the Beltway and among those who support Hillary Clinton. That there's nothing to see here, just move along. Really, this is a dastardly deed, and there's at least one email that's been doctored, so you can't believe any of the emails. Well, here's one that I believe. It's a recitation of one of the speeches that Hillary gave to the Goldman Sachs Alternative Investment Symposium in October of 2013. And this report describes her as almost apologizing for the Dodd-Frank reform bill, explaining that it had to pass for political reasons because, quote, if you were an elected member of Congress and people in your constituency were losing jobs and shutting businesses and everybody in the press is saying it's all the fault of Wall Street, you can't sit idly by and do nothing. And I think the jury is still out on that because it was very difficult to sort through it all. She also praised Deutsche Bank in a 2014 speech for the work that the bank has done in New York City on affordable housing. Now, while Deutsche Bank has made some contributions to homelessness campaigns, it was cited by the New York State Senate Committee for refusing to maintain foreclosed properties in New York City neighborhoods, costing those communities millions in unpaid fines, and it's about to face a multi-billion-dollar penalty from the Justice Department for defrauding investors with low-quality mortgage securities leading to the housing meltdown. So what we see is that when Clinton is behind closed doors and receiving a six-figure fee, she says things to pander to the people in the audience. And they are not diametrically opposed often, but very different from what she says in public for consumption by little old me and little old you. And here's one speech that she gave to Morgan Stanley in April of 2013, because one of her top aides, Tom Needus, had been working for Morgan Stanley. She hired him over at the State Department, let him collect a big deferred paycheck before he did, and she joked about how Needus, before he used the revolving door after she left the State Department to go right back to Morgan Stanley as a vice chairman, Clinton joked about the culture shock for Needus working in a government job. You should have seen his face when he learned there are no stock options at the State Department. But he soon not only settled in very nicely, he became positively enthusiastic when I told him we do have our own plane. Clinton told bankers that financial reform really has to come from the industry itself. We've heard that before. And here's Bernie Sanders' response to these revelations. Whatever Secretary Clinton may or may not have said behind closed doors on Wall Street, I am determined to implement the agenda of the Democratic Party platform, which was agreed upon by her campaign, and which calls for breaking up the largest financial institutions in this country. Well, Bernie, good luck with that. Because I don't think that Hillary Clinton will use the Democratic Party platform for anything more than, maybe some doilies at a White House reception. Shadowproof is also digging further into the emails, and Kevin Gostola published two pieces in the last couple of days. I've linked to one of them for you. He notes that Mark Siegel, a former Democratic Party official, wrote emails to John Podesta and others, suggesting that they go through the motions of reforming the superdelegate process, but not really change it. So he wrote, why not throw Bernie a bone and reduce the superdelegates in the future to the original draft of members of the House and Senate, governors, and big city mayors, eliminating the Democratic National Committee members who are not state chairs or vice chairs. He said, frankly, those people don't really represent constituents anyway. I know. I served on the DNC as executive director and as an elected member for 10 years. So, he says, if we give Bernie this in the convention's rules committee, his people will think they've won something from the party establishment. And it functionally doesn't make any difference anyway. They win, we don't lose, everyone is happy. So that's, political gamesmanship. I don't consider that to be particularly criminal, but it's part of this overall pattern of the Democrats colluding to give the nomination to Hillary Clinton and keep Bernie Sanders out. And here's Tom Perez, Labor Secretary in the Obama cabinet right now. And he sent an email to Podesta encouraging them to use Nevada as a place to show that the Bernie Sanders appeal was limited to young white kids. And the idea was to peel off people of color, that's African Americans and Latinos, get them to vote for Hillary, and then leave Bernie standing there with the Bernie bros, a bunch of white guys. And when you look at the way the campaign executed this strategy, they did use it pretty effectively. Nevada is the place where no chairs were thrown, but Rachel Maddow reported that chairs were thrown by Sanders supporters. The footage she used to depict that was from a World Wrestling Federation event where they intentionally threw chairs to stage some drama for the cameras. And so those are just examples of the way that party insiders and the media colluded to deny the nomination to Bernie Sanders. Every day I like to stop for a minute and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And let's see who's next on the list here. I don't think I've mentioned Pauline Nixon in a while. Simon Morton recently took out an annual subscription. Alice Carlson, she's a longtime supporter. And Keith Hull, have we heard your name lately? I don't know. I want to thank you for your support and invite others to join in. I could use some new subscribers today, right now, so don't wait. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. You click on the menu button, pulls down, you select Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and in minutes, you can be set up with your own subscription to the Peter B. Collins Podcast. As I've mentioned, I am a customer of Wells Fargo Bank. I also own 100 shares of the bank stock. And we now know that insiders at the bank were aware 10 years ago that there was such pressure on people to meet their sales quotas that they were cheating. They were opening credit card and bank accounts in people's names without their permission in order to keep their jobs. And John Stumpf, who became CEO or president of Wells Fargo in 2005, says that, oh gosh, he didn't learn about it until 2013. But there's substantial evidence from lawsuits that have been filed in recent weeks that show that Wells Fargo knew this was going on, and they repeatedly fired people who honored the ethics pledge at the bank and reported these unethical activities. And there are individual cases here that are stunning. Here's one, okay? A guy named Hanson, who started at Wells Fargo in 2008, worked his way up to a management job. A number of his region's top performers openly cheated. But in 2011, while stationed away from his branch to cover for a colleague, he came on a pretty serious case. The branch's bankers were inventing fake businesses and opening accounts in their name. So I called HR and said, what do I do? And they said, go to the ethics hotline. So he called the ethics hotline. The investigator asked for specifics like account numbers, the names of bankers who opened them. So Hanson said he pulled up the accounts to gather that information, and they fired him for following those instructions because they said that he wasn't authorized to access that information. Wow. Now, this is the bankster target that is politically correct. Here we have Hillary Clinton's speeches cozying up to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. And her supporters just want to say, oh, that's business as usual, just leave it alone. But, Wells Fargo, these people, that's too big. It should be broken up. The hypocrisy and the opportunistic outrage is really hard to take. Well, right in front of your ears, I'm opening up my latest letter from Donald J. Trump. It says he wrote it on Wednesday morning, but he doesn't mention which one. Now, the last time I got a letter from the Donald, it included a postage-paid return envelope, which I put in the mail with a note saying, I don't support frauds. He gave me another postage-paid business reply envelope, and I'm going to send a similar message in with this. This is a real old-fashioned kind of direct mail solicitation. And I'm not sure what list he got my name from. The Pentagon is expressing concern because the Islamic State has successfully used armed, tiny drones in recent months. Last week, in northern Iraq, the Kurdish forces there, who support the Iraqi government and get paid by the United States, they shot down a small drone the size of a model airplane. And they grabbed it, took it apart, and then it blew up, killing 2 of the fighters. In what is believed to be one of the first times that the folks called Daesh have successfully used a drone with explosives to kill troops on the battlefield. Now, the U.S. has been aware that they use them for reconnaissance, and they buy some of their drones from Amazon, just like you and I can. But this raises a bigger question, and that is we've used our drone technology very ruthlessly. Obama would claim it's been done efficiently. But we act as if nobody else has drones or nobody can copy that technology. And they have, and they will. And the idea that we can maintain this technical superiority for any length of time is rubbish. I want to commend the New York Times for continuing its series profiling individuals who were held by the United States at Guantanamo and other parts of our gulag during the dark years of the Bush era. And they pay a real price for it. Innocent men who now suffer from dramatic forms of mental illness and post-traumatic stress disorder. And in today's episode, they focus on a man named Suleiman Salim. And from the get-go, they were concerned that they had picked up the wrong guy. They were expecting a light-skinned Arab, and when he had been kidnapped and brought to the Mogadishu, Somalia airport in March of 2003, and they were shocked that he was in fact a dark-skinned African. They even asked him if he was the right guy. And the story goes on to explain how he was accidentally picked up and thrown into the American system, and the torture that he received. And the Times is identifying at least 39 men who were subjected to torture, the so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. And it details what Salim went through. And today, he is back in his home country. He raises pigeons. He had married 2 weeks before he was abducted by the United States, and he has never found that woman whom he was married to. We're learning of a surprising development here in California, where violent crime has been down and staying down for over 15 years. But the area where deaths are increasing are among people who are in official custody. That's people who are in jail, being transported to jail, or in state prison. And the number of deaths reached a new high of 760 in 2015. The trend started back in 2005, so it can't be blamed on Governor Brown's what he did was under federal court order to reduce the state prison population. He shifted a lot of people to the county jails. But these statistics of fatalities started to pick up even before Brown returned to the governorship. And finally today, I want to commend the California Scholars for Academic Freedom. They have issued a statement highly critical of the University of California at Berkeley for its move last month when they tried to shut down a course that was being taught by a student that was deemed to be pro-Palestinian. And the people who deemed that were a group of Jewish groups who leaned on the university, which embarrassed itself by canceling or suspending the program, and then they did reinstate it. I'm linking to this powerful statement from the group, and let me just pick a couple of excerpts here. Such groups are intervening in campus matters across the nation. They do so with the intent of chilling freedom of expression. They have a well-organized campaign to end any critical discourse on Israel. One of them, the Canary Mission website, has made its main mission to intimidate and blacklist students and faculty who speak out in support of Palestinian rights. The claims of these groups are usually intemperate and exaggerated characterizations of the statements or scholarly work that they target. In particular, the charge of anti-Semitism is routinely and opportunistically invoked, often on the basis of the spurious and unfortunate equation by the State Department between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Academic freedom includes, most importantly, the freedom for scholarly debate about controversial issues. And they close their statement by noting that it's a university's responsibility to tolerate a wide range of views on issues, even if they're unpopular or minority opinions. While in the most recent attack on academic freedom at UC Berkeley, the dean claimed that the university should not tolerate political agendas, surely the administrative suppression of the course also constituted political advocacy of a negative kind. That is very well put and quite persuasive. Thanks for listening to my news and comment podcast all the way to the bitter end. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling